the late 1930s, let's say 1940, and it's a replica of the original one-room schoolhouses that existed in Flagler County. And now why did they have one-room schoolhouses? Because they had no roads. There were no school buses, there was no transportation. And so they were scattered all over the county. So that's called a Little Red Schoolhouse. And it's one of our sort of magical spots that no one gets to see. But if you were determined, and if you did reach Diane, you'd get to see it. I've got some pictures of it in my book. And as I say, it's identical to a schoolroom in 1918. Everything in it's authentic. It's real. You could shoot a motion picture in there of 1918.
There you go, Ed.
Okay. Now we're headed back for Moody Boulevard. Let's talk a little bit what happened. Okay. The car was invented. Henry Ford was pumping out hundreds of thousands of cars. People were buying cars. They wanted to go to places. What was the most exotic, weird place you could go to was Florida. So what they did, they went to each county. They went to Indiana, they went to Illinois, and they said, hey guys, have you got a north-south road that might go down to Florida? If you do, we'll put it on a map, and we're going to call it the Dixie Highway. And we're going to have something new, it's called tourist. And they'd say, what's a tourist? Oh, that's somebody that'll spend money, and they're going to load their family in this Ford touring car. Remember, there's no gas stations, there's no motels. Hey, they haven't been invented. But we're going to build a map. And so the guy that was in charge of this is the guy that built the Indianapolis Speedway. They called it the Brickyard. And they paved this road with special bricks, which were called high-impact bricks. So the road we're on right now is a piece of the Dixie Highway. This thing was about 14 feet wide. It was paved with bricks, and the whole purpose was to bring these tourists. They called them tin can tourists because remember that they'd have a little trailer, a little tin trailer behind there, and they'd come chugging down this road because there were no gas stations. You'd have to carry your fuel with you. If you wanted food, you carried it on board. You'd have a tent, so you'd have a place to sleep at night. But there were crazy people in Chicago and Detroit, Philadelphia, New York City, nutty enough to load their families in these old cars, well, they weren't old then, and chug down to Florida. And this is the route you're on right now. This is it. And you're on top of it right now. Putt, 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 putt. Okay, now we're going to look for a turn that I hope our driver sees it, because I never can. But a few years ago, we had a lot of live oak trees in Flagler County, and these were very valuable for lumber, and people were cutting them down. So pretty soon we weren't going to have any live oak trees in Florida or in Flagler. So they bought a piece of land which was the old Moody homestead. In other words, the Moody family lived there, and the county bought it and set it up as a park. Now it's a park that no one has a clue is there, and we're going to go see it because this is where the brick road turned. It's where it went. Unfortunately, there are no bricks. The bricks now appear in fireplaces, foundations, barbecue pits, all over Florida. But they're no longer used as a road. But this is it. The sign says Old Brick Road. See, the sign says Brick Road? Yeah. But no bricks. It's sort of a mud road. It's not paved. And we go down to this terrific park that was bought by Flagler County at great expense, taxpayer money at work. And it contains a collection of these live oak trees. How old are these trees? We don't really know. Best guess is about 200 years. But right here is a little display built by the county at great expense of the original road bricks. Right there they are. There's your original bricks from the old brick road. And there they are, made by the Graves Brick Company in Georgia. and this is called Moody Park. This was the Moody home. The Moody family lived here. After the Moody family passed, the Marquis family lived here. Diane lived here for many years. The houses are gone. You can still see a stand of bamboo back there that they planted to make fishing poles. But this is where Mr. Moody lived. Now, Mr. Moody really was the founder of Flagler County. They wanted to call it Moody County, but Mr. Moody said, "Oh no, my good friend Henry Flagler is active here, and maybe if we call it Flagler County, he'll build a hotel here." Well, that never happened, but that's why it got called Flagler County. They were kind of trying to lure Henry Flagler down here. And unfortunately, Mr. Moody contracted the Spanish flu, and when they founded Flagler County, he came back and died here of Spanish flu, and his brother died a few weeks later of the same ailment. So it was kind of a sad story. He was a young man, and he really is the founder of Flagler County, is Mr. I. Moody. But this was their home. This is a quiet park. It's intended for you to come here with a sandwich, walk around, look at these old oak trees, meditate a bit of history. It's a quiet spot. No one comes here, but I kind of recommend it. It's very nice. So anyway, you know where Moody Park is now. So how about that? We've got a lot of spots like this. The county is full of spots. Now, a little background. We've got quite a bit of history here. We had the Spanish in St. Augustine for about 200 years. And St. Augustine fundamentally was an army camp. They existed to protect the Spanish treasure ships coming up from Mexico, up the Gulf Stream. So they were in St. Augustine for about 200 years. Then the British were here in Florida, controlling Florida. And they ran Florida right up to the American Revolution. After the American Revolution, the British were kicked out of Florida, and the Spanish came back, and the Spanish ran Florida. Now, along the ocean, there was a great swamp. It was an enormous wetland. It ran from where the Pellicer Creek is today, all the way south down to the Tomoka River. This was a humongous wetland. Today it's called the Loop. It's called the Tomoka Park Estuary, but we call it Hewitt's Swamp today, which is only a shadow of what it was. So basically the city of Palm Coast, or our modern cities, were built on top of this wetland, which was a big swamp. So if you bought a house in here, you're sitting on dead Indians and old rotting logs and stuff. But this was an immense freshwater swamp. And the only way you get a picture of this, if you fly over Flagler County in an airplane, as I have done, you'll see little lakes and ponds everywhere, which are remnants of this immense wetland that was once here. Now on your left, there's a huge lake. It's adjacent to our present airport. This is an FAA landing field, so for seaplane people to get their licenses. There's a big fence here. It's all fenced in. You can't get to it. There's no access at all. But there's an immense lake on your left, which is an FAA airport, and it's a landing field for seaplanes. And every now and then a seaplane will land on top of an alligator, and the results are spectacular, and they make the newspaper. But anyway, the lake is here, and it's right on your left. Hey, if there's any questions, interrupt me, because I'm going to be jabbering this whole trip. So please holler out if you...
Did the brick road end where we were on, or did it continue on?
It eventually ran all the way down to Miami. It ran all the way down to Miami, Florida. They called it the brick road. It wasn't always paved with bricks. In some cases, it'd be a nasty dirt road. Remember, it was a sort of a political thing. So fundamentally it was lines on a map. But in this area it was paved with bricks. And the bricks came from Georgia pretty much because they had good clay. They called them high impact bricks. What they did, they baked them at high temperatures so that the clay would sort of become solid. And they were very tough bricks for road building. And they made very excellent roads. So you're in the Z section right now. When they built the city of Palm Coast, they adopt letter grades. So you're in places like zonal geranium. You can send your Christmas cards from zonal geranium and zebula and stuff like that. So you're in the Z section, and on your left is that immense lake, which is, you'll see the fence for it, and it's an FAA landing field. And as I say, there's no way to get to it. But it's there. And you're right in the middle of the swamp. It wasn't called Graham Swamp at that time. Under the British surveyors found this swamp, and they were very impressed with it because here was fresh water right next to the salty ocean. Plus the land was wonderful. It was black muck land, and apparently you could grow anything in this land. So to our amazement, we found that there were over 20 plantations, over 20 active plantations right here in Flagler County, which began under the British period, continued under the second Spanish period, and they had steam engines, they grew sugar, they grew Sea Island cotton, they grew indigo. There were thousands of slaves here in Flagler County, thousands. And yeah, you say, I don't know anything about them. You're right, you don't. One of the things that used to bug me a little bit, I'd go to the African American Society and remember that these folks came from the same place I did, Chicago up north, Pennsylvania, Detroit, and so forth, and they really didn't know about the colonial things that were going on down here. And there certainly was a lot going on. And we're going to talk a little more about that later, but it was pretty darn interesting.
Tell them that it's still.
So anyhow, getting back to Flagler County,